Good day and welcome to episode 26 of the Humble Pursuit podcast. My name is Bill and I'm joined in studio, ignoring this guy, with Tyler, who is going to be older by the time this comes out, and Thomas. How are you today, gentlemen?
Doing well.
You know, we're older every minute that goes by. So we'll all be older by the time this podcast comes out. Just heads up.
Okay, can we move on?
Start over.
Okay, no. We are joined by a wonderful guest today. And I think it's fair to say that I don't know you, but we know each other. Is that a fair assessment of our relationship?
Yeah, I think that would be
Okay.
accurate.
I think it's fair to say if he knew you, he wouldn't be here.
That's probably
So,
accurate
I
as
would
well.
agree. I would agree with
Pastor-
We've not had a repeat guest yet, so
Chad was on twice. Thank you very much. Pastor Jesse Smith is joining us today.
Yeah,
We are
thanks
so
for having
glad
me.
to have you. You know how this came about is we're drinking coffee, and Pastor Smith does not. Do you go by Jesse, Pastor Smith,
Jesse's
or
fine.
Mr. Smith?
Jesse's fine.
Jesse. Jesse coffee's down from us a couple tables. We're drinking coffee, and everybody gets up to leave, and I see Jesse go up to get a refill, and I'm like, Jesse needs to be on our podcast. And so I went and trapped you on Tuesday, or on last Friday, and said, hey, we're recording in 4 days, and you're in, right?
That was pretty much how it went.
Excellent. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? Well, I did usually we have a little bit of an introduction. We're not even going to go have that because we're going to get right to it. But I did make a couple of phone calls. Don't be looking at my cheat sheet.
Got to see what you're saying.
I did make a couple of phone calls to find out about this guy that we're going to have on the podcast to make sure that this wasn't a huge mistake. And here's some feedback that I got. Jesse is confident and humble. He's always willing to say and do what's right, but only because he cares about the truth, not because he's arrogant. I've experienced Jesse as supportive of ministries that aren't even his, lacking jealousy and full of passion for all of the Lord's work. That was Pastor Jeff from Revolution that said that. So I'm already know that I'm leveled up. He's outclassed me already just by one.
Yes, I agree.
I think the first word did. And then one more that I had, he's a solid Christian man, self-disciplined, thoughtful, intentional, and transparent in all he does. While we miss him at the mission, we know he is being true to following God's will for his life. Can you guess who said that?
Yeah, it's probably my old boss.
Your old boss, Chad
Yeah.
Young, with the Salina Rescue Mission. So, yeah, that didn't inflate anything. There's no arrogance in there, is there now?
And those are hard words to hear. I think
Those-
when you have somebody saying that about you, it's humbling. It's hard to hear.
Isn't it weird how somebody can dog... Tyler, how is it that when somebody dogs you all day, it's easy to hear that, but when we hear these positive words, it's hard to receive those?
it's really hard to be, complimented on your humility and to have that land in any. It's either I'm gonna take pride in my humility, that doesn't work, and then but it's just a hard one to hear. You've been striving at that. I bet that didn't come naturally. All those things that were said about you, those were decisions at some point. I'm gonna choose to not be jealous. I'm gonna spread the love around different ministries, and yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. What, Thomas? I'm passing this around, or maybe we could ask this guy.
Right? Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for anybody to hear good things. It's hard to receive it, I think. You can hear it, but how do you take that in and be, hey, I appreciate you saying that about me because I'm acknowledging that you were right, and I'm not sure you're right.
Well, me personally, I'm so thoughtful that I try not to ever make you feel uncomfortable by giving you those compliments.
And you have succeeded.
And I've succeeded.
You've done a great job of not inflating our ego.
Nice,
Yes.
nice. Well, Jesse, before we begin, I like to ask a couple of icebreaker questions. Thomas loves these. I used to ask really silly ones, and Thomas would just sit there and look like he looks right now. But I changed them up a little bit, and they're a little bit more fluid and just kind of calm on any nerves that we may have. What's one of your favorite childhood memories?
That's a tough one. I think probably just going off the top of my head is, we all love Christmas when we were kids. We love getting gifts at that age. And I remember when I got my first Nintendo. If you guys remember the Nintendo when it came out, the original one. I think I played that thing all day.
I remember the Atari.
Yeah.
Getting it brand new back in the day. Good stuff, good stuff. What book are you currently reading? Not the Bible.
I have several on my desk, but one of them was Tozer's Knowledge of the Holy. I've been through that several times, where I've been kind of going back through it through some of the messages I've been preparing. Okay. So that's been on my desk for quite a while.
Tyler, what are you reading?
I am reading. What's the name of it? The Rise and Fall of the Inner Self, or something like that. The Triumph of the Inner Self. It's one that Jeff actually recommended. That it's just about how did we come to a society where it's accepted that someone says, "I'm a woman trapped in a man's body," and just the author theorizes that it's like long ago philosophies that are starting to come out about the difference between we used to conform ourselves to the world. I see how the world works and I want to change myself to be like the world, and now it's my inner self is the truth, and the outside world needs to change to conform to my inner self. So interesting.
Thomas, what are you reading?
I'm reading The Good and Beautiful Life.
And what's that about?
It's the second book in a series about. The first one is The Good and Beautiful God, which was more about understanding God's character, Jesus's personality, and this is more of how you can apply that to yourself. And then the third one is Good and Beautiful Community.
I am currently reading something with no redeeming value whatsoever.
Louis L'Amour has redeeming value.
This is not. I'm reading Rachel Kane, and I'm on the Wolf Hunter River in the Stillhouse Lake series, and it's about serial killers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, no redeeming value whatsoever. Jesse? What is your morning routine?
So you obviously got to get up, and being an older man, you got to take care of some business first.
Old man, just he looked to you for camaraderie in that.
But I get up and generally try to spend a good 45 minutes to an hour just quiet, alone with God, reading scripture. My wife and I are currently studying Revelation, so I've been going pretty in depth in that and trying to just understand what God was trying to relay through that book. But that is sometimes very difficult to understand. So, but that's usually it. And then I get to the office, 8 a.m., 8:30, somewhere in there to start my day and start working on the things I need to work on.
Nice. All right. Well, are you calm, cool, and collected now, and you're not nervous, and you're just ready to do this?
Sure.
Excellent. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about your youth? Where are you from? How was your childhood?
Well, I'm actually from the Salina area. I grew up in Bennington, just north of here a little ways, and my parents, we lived in the same house. They still live in the same house as I grew up in. I live just right down the road from them. And so, it was a pretty decent childhood. Nothing major. We ended up, off and on going to church, and I got those seeds planted very early on in what the Christian faith would be like. And so, that was, a lot of what I did was play sports. That's who I was in high school. I was that jock. I think I mentioned that to you last night when we were talking. Just that's who I was. Everything revolved around sports. Everything revolved around athletics.
What position did you play in baseball?
Didn't play baseball.
He didn't even play sports, did he? Didn't even.
That's the one I did.
Okay, so you played football. You got an athletic build still. Almost look like me. Almost. If you keep trying. What'd you play in football?
Well, I played 8-man football, so it was, it's a different game than the 11-man, and I played what needed to be played.
Okay.
I was a tight end. I was a long snapper. I played starting quarterback my junior year, starting running back my senior year. Whatever needed.
Nice. So you got those seeds planted, and then life just zoomed all the way until you're the pastor of a predominant church here in Salina, Kansas, and everything was just even keel.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Excellent.
how it happened. We're done.
Okay.
It's been fun. Thanks.
Cut.
No, it was definitely not an easy road. I didn't.
But wait, because you met somebody in high school, didn't you?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Who did you meet?
Actually, I mean, we knew each other. We went to the same school. We kind of grew up in the same area together. And I love to embarrass my wife because she pursued me.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I can't relate to that at all.
No, you can't.
But I was coming into my freshman year, and I just broke up with my junior high girlfriend. Very serious
That's
relationship.
serious stuff. Serious.
And one of my wife's friends came up to me and she said, Kimmy really likes you. You ought to ask her out. So what, being a young man, what do? You go ask her out. The rest is history, right?
Nice.
No, I was 14 years old at that point, and we've been together almost 30 years.
Wow.
Been married for this year will be 23 years being
Wow.
married. So
Wow.
yeah, it wasn't. It's not always easy. I mean, it's Valentine's Day today, and it's sometimes you got to really work at your marriage.
I was thinking about this morning. I was going to go on and philosophize. How do you say that?
That is exactly how
Is
you
that
say
it? Philosophize? Is that it?
That's how you say it. Yeah.
I was going to go philosophize on the interwebs, on the Facebook, and I was like, being in love and marriage is so easy, but it's also the hardest thing that you'll ever do.
Absolutely.
It's so rewarding, but it's also the most taxing. And you could just go on with those indefinitely, and I chose not to do any of them and just sent my wife a nice message
Good call.
that ended with check yes or no.
Ooh.
She checked yes.
I asked Lydia to be my Valentine.
Did you? Did she
said
check yes?
She
Did
said
she check yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. All right, so after school,
After high school.
after high school,
You had the sports career that just kept going. and going
Actually,
and
yeah,
going
I tried to play football at the collegiate level. That lasted a year. Recognized I was not coming from a small 8-man school. I was just not gonna make it. And
where did you
college.
go?
I went to Hutch JUCO.
Okay,
I got recruited
nice.
down there
Nice.
to go play, and I got a year of school paid for, but that's a job.
Yeah, it is.
College football is a job. I mean, they have you there in the weight room, practice, film room, all these different things, a lot. So it was a lot to run through.
Was that a hard reckoning?
No.
So what happened after that first year? Where'd you land?
Well, so my wife, which she wasn't my wife at the time, she was going to Wichita State while I was at Hutch, and she said, well, I really need to transfer to Manhattan, to K-State, to finish my degree that I'm getting. And I said, well, I'm done with football. I'm going to K-State. So I followed her up there, but it's a good decision. I don't look back and regret not trying to continue to pursue it. So
Now, did you go to school or did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Went to K-State, finished my degree there.
What's your degree in?
I have a degree in accounting,
In accounting.
believe it or not.
Pastor
Fun.
accounting. That just right in line. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got those comments that said, you don't look like an accountant. I said, well, yeah, because that's not what defines me.
Absolutely.
For sure. So you started studying accounting because you wanted to be an accountant? Is this like a family thing, or what drew you to that?
Numbers are easy. For some reason, they're black and white, right?
It either works or doesn't.
Yeah, and so it just in high school, I took some accounting classes, and it just kind of was like, oh, this is easy. I can do this, and it paid well, and so that's what I pursued.
And you got your degree. You went into that field.
Yep. Yeah. my wife and I, we got married right before our senior year in college.
So you're 22-ish.
No, I was 20. I was 21. 20 when I got married, and then I turned 21, got older right after that. And so, yeah, finished up that first year, and then, we, I say we, Kimmy said, I'm moving to Colorado. You want to go? I'm like, well, we're married, so yeah, I guess we're moving to Colorado.
I'm liking her approach.
Yeah,
I really am.
But so we moved out there, and I went out, and I remember driving out and finding having an interview. I drove out there. Next day, I'm sitting in class and get a phone call and go get a job offer. So here we go. Yeah, and it's in the accounting field. It's a good entry-level job, and so we move out there and start living in the big city.
So you were in the Denver area?
Yeah, in the Denver area.
Nice.
And did accounting turn out to be what you hoped it would be, thought it'd be? Is it?
I mean, it was easy. It was easy-ish work, but it sitting in an office all day, which I still do, it's not the ideal.
Mm-hmm. So you're in Denver. Life's good. Mm-hmm. You've got your newlyweds. Mm-hmm. You got community. What's life look like out in Denver? Or how long were you guys out there?
No, we were out there a little over 3 years. We were not living a life that resembled anything that our lives look like today. We were living for ourselves. I mean, and that started, in high school, we were good kids. We didn't do any of the things that typical high schoolers do. And you get into college and you're out of your parents' house and you start doing what college kids do. I mean, alcohol became a part of it. Marijuana became a part of our lives. And that really continued as we got out to Colorado, because obviously they're a little more, the state's a little more liberal, and people out there are a little more liberal, and just those type of things. So it was easy to fall into that pattern and that habit of just using different substances. So, I mean, our lives did not always look like they look today.
Okay. So after Colorado, you guys, what's the next step in your adventure?
Well, I mean, part of the reason we moved back home was 2004. There was this, we had this annual trip that we did with some neighbors of ours out to Moab, Utah. I don't know if you guys ever been to Moab or know what it is.
No.
It's an outdoor enthusiast.
Is it by Bennington Lake? Maybe
it's close.
Canopolis?
Just
okay.
close.
That's about as far
It's
as I
closer
go.
to Canopolis.
Okay. Excellent.
But it is a outdoor enthusiast just mecca. And so we'd go out to the desert and we would camp and we would ride motorcycles. And but the most important thing is we would party.
Yes.
And that's what we did. And so in one of those trips in the spring of 2004, we were out and we were doing that. And we were, I had a line that I had drawn that I wouldn't use while I was riding. I still ride motorcycles to this day, but it's I don't use while I'm riding. Don't drink, don't eat those things. And so we're out in the desert, we're riding.
Now, wait a second. Let me clarify. Are you saying while you're physically riding, you're not popping a beer?
Correct.
Or before you ride?
Right. Not before, not during.
You don't want to drive intoxicated.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to drive intoxicated.
I didn't have said rule, so I was clarifying.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there was a line there. There was a level of morality, I guess you could say, that, I didn't want to hurt myself, because, I can't say that I've never done, driven and intoxicated, but not on a bike. It's a little different of a story. And, but, this day we were, the night before, obviously, we were out and having fun. And the next day we were riding, and we were way out in the desert. And as we were heading back to the trucks, it became this competition. Guys, we compete against each other.
Yes.
And we, and so we were riding probably too aggressively, and we were traversing some trails that probably should have been ridden a little bit slower. I mentioned to you last night that we were racing back. At least in my mind, I don't know if anybody else was. I was going to be the first one to get back to the trucks.
You were thirsty.
I was thirsty. And
You're in the desert.
We were in the desert. We were sweating.
A little Rocky Mountain Kool-Aid
Yes.
to cool off after a long day in the desert.
Yeah. So I was winning. I was not going to get past.
Nice.
I was not going to get past.
Duly noted.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know anything about Moab. As you go into Moab, on the side of the road, there's these things, and it's all throughout the desert, but it's these cliffs. They're called bookshelf cliffs. And basically, you got the desert floor, and then out of the desert floor, it comes straight up. And there's a plateau on the top. So it's a bookshelf on the side. And we were riding a Jeep road that was on the side of one of those. Wide as a Jeep, two track, just not much space. And so obviously you got one side it's down and one side it's up. And I had a bit of a spill on that road. I was coming up to a corner and I knew I was going too fast, so I was trying to get speed off the bike. And next thing I know, I'm waking up in the hospital.
Now, did you go down or did you go into the side?
I stayed on the road.
Okay, excellent.
I stayed on the road somehow.
But it was that fast. Like,
I
I need to slow down. I'm in the hospital.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I didn't know what happened. Luckily, I didn't have to be admitted or anything. I was just getting checked out at the emergency room. I had ended up with a pretty major concussion. My helmet that I was wearing at the time, it still sits in my office to this day. It's got scars all over the side of it, and broken arm, and then I had this amazing bruise from my hip to my knee.
Nice.
The whole side of my leg was black and blue, and that was it. I mean, it was a gnarly accident for just having a little bit of injuries. And so the story goes, because my buddies have tried to fill in the pieces that I don't remember. I got back on the motorcycle and I took off again. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I got back on and I took off, and they were like, "You were gone." I'm still competing, right? I'm still trying to get back first. And they come up to me about, I don't know, half a mile from the vehicle, and I'm just sitting on the side of the road. They're like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "My head's pounding, my arm hurts, and why is my handlebars on my bike all screwed up?" Mm-hmm. They're like, "Dude, you just had an accident back there. You don't remember that?" Like, "No, don't remember anything." And so, yeah, there's about an hour of my life there that I do not remember anything about what was going on. I was out on my feet.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that led to you coming back to Kansas
Well,
in an indirect way.
in a pretty direct way. I mean, we started after we got back. We started really questioning the direction of our lives. I mean, it was kind of this wake up call. You look back on it now and you say, "Well, that was God's hand moving, kind of slapping you upside the head, saying,
Yeah, that's a backhand.
hey, dummy, you're not going in the right direction." And so yeah, we started questioning things, and I said, this lifestyle that we're living out here in the city, we can't continue it. It's just, we know better, right? We had those seeds planted when we were younger. My wife's family, they were very active in the church, and so she had those seeds planted as well, and so we started questioning things, and we decided finally that, okay, we need to move home.
See, you're not too far. You have 3 daughters, is that correct?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No, I have 2 daughters and 1 son.
2 daughters and I was really close.
Daughter, son, daughter.
Because you're not too far from that first daughter being born at this time, are you? Within a couple of years? Yeah.
A couple of years,
okay.
yeah. And that was one of the things, if we were going to start a family, the cities, I mean, they can be fine places to raise a kid, but it just wasn't going to be for us.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we ended up deciding, and so that accident happened at the end of April of 2004, and by September, we had our house. Our house was on the market, but not sold. But we were moving home. I had a job, came back for interviews and those things back here, and found a job, and so we were moving home.
Stayed in the accounting.
Stayed in the accounting. Yep.
Okay.
and so still following that route. And at that point, that's one of those times when I met actually Pastor Jeff at Revolution. We came home and we didn't know where to go to church. We didn't know, never really been to church as a couple a lot. And so we knew some folks at Crossroads, and that was the time when Revolution was getting started. So we were kind of Saturday nights, right?
Yes, sir.
We were hungry at that time because we were like, well, this is something that we want our lives to change. And so we were going Saturday nights, we were going Sunday mornings, and
I've probably seen you there on Saturday nights because that's about the time I started going there.
Yeah, I'm sure our paths crossed. It's where we know each other, but we don't know each other.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So when you had the wreck, and you'd obviously have a life-threatening situation, was there any sort of vision? Was there any great grand event that happened to you at that you thought, I'm being told I need to do something different? I mean, was there any type of
not really, not at that time. I mean, it was just, I go back and you look at those things and you say, yeah, that's God working. But I just said this last Sunday in a message that God has woven right and wrong into our creation. We know right from wrong. And I think it was just one of those things where we knew we weren't living the right lifestyle, a lifestyle that's going to last.
And you probably didn't find that out just at that accident. There had been,
right.
You felt.
But I think that's a realistic, my story includes a event, a life-threatening event too. And everybody always wanted to ask me, was there this life-changing, earth-shaking moment? I'm like, it was pretty black,
Right.
I mean, now there was emotions and there was things that I was going through, but I think that's what most people have. Now, whether it's an accident or whether it's a purposeful change, it's not always this dramatic, huge thing. It's just like how you said that, it's interwoven into what your life already is. It's just something that might make you change your perspective a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I can relate to that because I had one as well, and I just recreated it with my son the other day, and that's one of my memories is blackness. No earth-shattering thing. No, I'm going to change my life because of this moment right here. Just blackness, and there was fear in the blackness for me because I wasn't living right.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I can remember saying, this is that moment for me, but I don't remember when those were. So they actually weren't watershed moments, like, this is it. But they actually didn't define me. Probably it's been a definition by these small little things, maybe punctuated by something big, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right. So
I think one of the things, just to kind of play off that, though, is we had our neighbors that would share the gospel with us from time to time. Now, they weren't, I look back and I'm like, okay, they weren't fully living it, but they invited us to church. They came over and we hung out, and they, hey, are you really have another beer? You really, all these different things. And so I think God was using them in the midst of that time to kind of draw us into Him. So, I mean, God uses people. That's His main method of getting us to wake up.
Yeah.
So let's go on to life up until the birth of your first child.
I mean, yeah, life just kind of moved on. We were, just living life. Our oldest daughter, she was born in 2006, and that kind of changes things a little bit. Trying to figure out how to be parents and make all that happen, and so yeah, I mean, that was our kids have all grown up in the church, and so we have tried to instill that in them, so they have those seeds planted in their lives, and hopefully they're and I know they are developing their own relationship with Christ now, so that they don't have to go through some of these things. And we're open about what life has brought us, because we don't want them to make those same mistakes.
So the child's born. Are you still drinking and doing the other stuff?
No, I mean, there was a period of time, probably 3-4 years there, where all that was gone. And then, as we do, that kind of slips back in sometimes.
Yeah.
And so that began to slip back in. Alcohol did. smoking pot and all those things. Never have. But alcohol slipped back in, and that was, probably 3 or 4 years where that kind of again took hold. We were still going to church, still trying to change our lives, but that was a piece of it still. That kind of slipped back in, and so I think that's when you really wake up to the truth of this is not helpful. In things, you start seeing that, okay, you're slipping back, you're going back in a direction that is not good. And God uses people. He used different people in our lives to help us see that. My wife was one of those. She just kind of kept on me about, well, should you really be doing this again? So he uses that to help us change.
And then you mentioned yesterday when we spoke briefly that something happened in 2008.
Yeah, it was.
Or was it 2009? I don't remember.
Somewhere in there. I don't even know if I remember the exact dates.
Okay.
But yeah, so there's those times in your life when, you really want an answer from God and you're praying over something. Even in the midst of all this is, I'm kind of slipping. I'm praying about different things. And one of the things I'm praying about is my employment. When we moved home, we were living in Abilene and we were driving to Manhattan. I was driving to Manhattan every day to work. So that's a 45-minute drive. And so I'm praying about, Lord, I need a different job. I want to be closer to home. I want to, I. Those type of prayers, right? And
I'm good at those. Yeah.
And so God answered my prayer. Now, I've only heard God speak to me twice in my life. I've heard his voice audibly. And this was one of them, and it really scared me. So I'm praying, and I fall asleep praying about this. And so I wake up in the middle of the night, dark house, no one's up, and I hear the words, "Stay where you are." Now, I'm thinking, who's in this room? Like, I'm like hitting Kimmy. I'm like, hey, did you hear that? No, go to sleep. Well, I finally I started understanding as I laid there in fear what that was. That was God. He was speaking to me in that moment. And so that really, I think that was one of those things too that realized, okay, he is real. He is there. He cares about these things. And he wanted me to stay where I was at in my employment at that time. He didn't want me to move. And I still don't understand why he did that. But that's what he wanted me to do. And so, that was a moment where there was actually fear of the Lord, where you're paralyzed because you didn't know what was going on until you started to understand, okay, that was God. And there's nobody in the house. I fell asleep praying about this, and he's answered me at this moment.
And did you listen?
I did, for a while, yeah.
For a while.
No, actually, I stayed at that job for another 2 or 3 years. I ended up in 2011. My mom sent me an advertisement for a company, a really big company here in town. They were needing an accounting manager. And she's like, you ought to apply for this job. She was wanting me to move to Salina. I was like, nah. 2 weeks later, she sends it to me again. You really ought to apply for this job. Okay, Mom. You got to satisfy your mom sometimes.
Absolutely.
Threw a resume at it. The next day, I was in for an interview. 2 weeks later, I had a job offer. And so I think that was part of where God was saying, I got something better for you, but you need to trust me in that. And it was much better. Much bigger company, a lot better pay. I mean, it was amazing what he did in the midst of that.
Cool.
So we still haven't got to the transformation from accounting to pastoring. I still don't understand that. So we'll take us.
It doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense to me. I haven't got there yet.
It's perfect, right?
So tell me about that.
So I'm at this manufacturer here in town, large company. I'm actually I received a promotion in the midst of this, as I'm working there and I'm proving myself, and these are all things I'm not seeking out. They come to me and they say, hey, you want to do this? And sure. And I was becoming more and more involved at Crossroads, because that's where we had kind of landed as our church home. And we were doing youth ministry at the time. I was doing some other things and coaching basketball for the local Christian homeschool group here in town. And I'm just like, I'm getting very discontent with accounting work. It's pushing around paper. It's just, it pays the bills, right? That's what it is at this point. And my wife and I, we got invited to a leaders retreat for Crossroads because we were, doing youth ministry and these different things. And in the midst of that, our founding pastor, Pastor Ron Bull, this is the first time that he mentions retiring at some point. He founded the church. He's been there forever, and he's saying to the leaders of the church, I'm getting older. Going back to that older thing, right?
Happens.
And he says, someday I'm going to retire. I'm not going to be here anymore, and we need to start preparing for that. And that was actually 6 years before he actually retired. And that was in 2014. I specifically remember that I was 3 years into my job at the company here in town. And in that moment, I said I've heard God speak twice in my life, audibly. In that moment, in a room full of people with chattering going on and somebody talking and different things happening, he mentions this. He says, I'm going to retire someday, and we're going to need to start planning for the next pastor. And I hear a voice that says, that's you.
Whoa.
And I'm kind of sitting in a chair, and my back's against the wall like it is here today. I'm like, who's behind me? Who's talking in my ear? There's just a wall. And it took me a little bit, again, just like the first time, because God doesn't always do the same thing the same way every time. And I started discerning, no, you got the wrong guy, Lord.
Because you're like slaying it in the accounting world.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm not, I'm really just enjoying life, and we got 3 kids at that point where they're growing. You need money to raise 3 kids. I mean, if you guys have kids, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't have any.
Okay. And so God, and so I just started wrestling with that, and I think of Moses when he was called to go back to the Israelites in Egypt and to lead out of that, and he goes back and forth with God, and he just says, no, you got the wrong person. I can't speak. I can't do any of these things. God says, I'll send your brother with you. What does his brother ever do, really? Not a whole lot. And so I finally resigned. That sounds bad, but I finally resigned to the fact that, okay, if I'm gonna truly follow God, I have to start doing something to see if this is real. And so I go to Pastor Ron, and I ask him to mentor me. I don't tell him why. I don't tell him anything about what I've heard, because it still scares me, like transitioning. And so we start meeting on a weekly basis, and eventually he gives me the opportunity to preach on a Sunday morning, which was terrifying, and still is to this day, every Sunday. But and so we did, and then eventually I mentioned to him, I start sharing the story of how God's been working and what he's been saying, and he's like, oh, okay, well, we need to start doing some extra stuff here, start planning possibly. And he wasn't, he was not, he could not hand pick his successor and how our church is set up and how our denomination is set up, but he had a pretty big influence in that. And so, yeah, he kept giving me opportunities to preach and kind of refine those skills. And eventually I just kind of had enough with the accounting world that I said, I'm really want to just get out of it. I want to do something different. And I saw now if you know anything about accounting, an accounting manager or a controller, that's a pretty high up position. And I saw a bookkeeping position at the Salina Rescue Mission. Now, if you know bookkeeping's down here where, corporate controller is kind of up at the top of the level. And I knew somebody at the rescue mission who was on their board out there, and so I contacted him and I said, what's the deal with this? I'm willing to look at this. I'm done with the corporate world. And kind of like with coming to Salina, next day I had an interview. The day after that, I got another interview with some other people, and the next week I had a job offer.
Nice.
And so that was kind of the transition out of corporate world accounting into ministry, because the Salina Rescue Mission obviously is a Christ-centered ministry for guys in this town who are needing help.
So when you decided that's what you were going to do, did that not feel like falling? I mean, when you like, according to everybody else, I have a successful job. Mm-hmm. We have a family, mm-hmm. and it's my responsibility. And for me to step out of that, I mean, how did that feel?
So to everyone around me, it looked like failure. It looked like what are you doing? To me, I was like, I'm winning. I'm getting out of this corporate world, and I'm gonna go do something that actually makes a difference. And so to everyone around me, it was just like you said. Mm-hmm. What are you thinking? What are you doing? I remember telling my dad that I was going to be leaving my job and going to the mission, and he didn't understand it at first. He was kind of like, what? Just shaking his head, just couldn't believe it. And now he sees why. He understands what God was doing in the midst of that, and because that was preparation. The mission was just preparation for what God was wanting me to really do.
Nice.
And so where to go from there?
Well, one of the things that I'd always wanted to do in the accounting field is to get out of the accounting field. And so I kept looking for opportunities to branch into like operations or something like that within the company I was working within, and everyone just said, no, you're good at accounting. My bosses said, you're good at accounting. No, you're going to stay here. You can't. Like, great. So 9 months after I started out the mission, I was in this bookkeeping role, okay? And our operations director, that was his title, he ended up resigning and moving and going somewhere else. And so kind of like with when I was in the accounting world, I just kept getting promotions, and God just kept giving me these different opportunities. Chad, out at the mission, he came to me and he said, you want to step into this role? Operations director out at the mission? I mean, you're right underneath him. Like you're running the day-to-day operations of the mission. Never done that before. Prayed over it, and I said, Lord, this is what I've wanted. You've known this. And I think, when you asked about how it felt to kind of step down, I think God was saying, okay, are you willing to do whatever I ask you to do, even if it's bookkeeping? And then he said, okay, you are, and now I'm going to move you into something different. And so I really see that as God's hand. He was moving, and so I moved into that role and started learning, started to get to minister to men even more. I got to lead the staff there at the mission, really trying to pour into them just what God would have us do there and all these different things, learning from Chad because he was amazing. He was my boss there, but he was just an amazing mentor when I was there. And then, it came to the point at Crossroads where Ron said he gave us a date. Still going to church there. I had went before the board and asked to become an associate pastor, if they would bless that, because the board has to bless that. And they did, and Ron came and he gave us a date that said, I'm going to be retiring in 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020,
nice.
Right?
Yes.
And so that process started of looking for a pastor, and I had to go through the entire interview process. I had to submit a resume, all these different things, and I had to interview just like anybody, just like the other candidates did, because they interviewed other candidates to come in and be the pastor at Crossroads. And eventually, February of 2020, I got a phone call, and it was somebody from the church board, and they said, you're the one. We think you're the one. And I said, are you sure? I have no experience. I mean, I can do the books. I can do accounting work for you, but I'm not a pastor, right? And again, it was just one of those things where, okay, Lord, if you don't show up, we're both going to look stupid.
I was reminded, and I actually wrote it down after our conversation yesterday, is that, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And, I mean, you've stepped up and you've taken those callings, even when it looked insane to people on the outside, and just kept going. And so then in 2020, you probably had an adventurous first couple of years, and your attendance dropped. How did that feel?
Well, it was
to 0.
Yeah. So that was February is kind of when we made that announcement, and then August was supposed to be the actual transition. So that gave, was able to give the mission plenty of time and train my replacement. And then obviously in March of 2020, things changed in our world, and churches shut down, things happened. I remember the first Sunday that I was the pastor of Crossroads, August 2nd, 2020. The number of people there was about half of what it was in February of 2020, just 6 months earlier. And, that kind of felt like a blow, but I was like, okay, well, it's going to be all right. It's going to be, God is in control of all this, and things have slowly, some of that was due to having this young, unexperienced guy come in and be the pastor of this church. Like you said, it's been here for 20-some years, and some of it was just people were afraid to come back, and we had to work through some of that stuff. And so, it's been an adventure for 3 years now almost, to try to figure this out, try to get people back engaged and help them to see that we need to be together in community, be with each other as the body. And so that's been the challenge really over the past 3 years.
I mean, becoming a pastor is no small challenge, but being the first pastor after the founder, how's that dynamic been about, like you said, establishing trust, this young guy? What's that been like?
Well, I think it's been a little bit easier because I want to say I grew up in the church. I mean, not like from a young age, but in my Christian walk. And so they were able to actually see me progress from, someone who was just kind of there and disengaged on the Sunday mornings to someone who's starting a family to someone now involved in youth ministry to being on the church board and church leadership, just to see that progression. So I mean, there was still some trust to be built, just from a leadership perspective, but I think it was a little bit easier than if someone would have came from the outside, or if I would have went somewhere else and had no experience at all. So but there is definitely that trust that has to be built in any situation like that.
What about? I mean, Crossroads is a unique church and who it attracts. What challenges have you found in addition to just pastoring, but to just pastoring that church?
I mean, we focus on folks who life is given up on, or they feel like life is given up on, and so they come with a lot of issues. I mean, just like I did when I first came there, right? I mean, trying to figure out who you are, trying to leave a lifestyle of maybe drug or alcohol abuse, and it's the challenge. I think comes from helping them to stop identifying with what they've done or what they do, to identifying with who they are in Christ now. I think that's the biggest challenge. To say, well, somebody comes and they say, well, I'm a drunk. No. You're a child of God who used to struggle with alcohol, or maybe you still do, but we're working through that. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to get people to stop identifying with what they've done and start identifying with who God says they are.
That's cool.
So if there were a step if you could go back to yourself and talk to yourself, let's say in Colorado, when you're making poor choices, you probably think life is good in the moment, but you know that there's something else out there. What do you tell that person?
There's, you guys talked earlier about the blackness that you feel when you're in that spot. And when you're in that blackness, there is no hope. You think about, if you guys have ever been to the Cave of the Winds in Colorado, they take you down way underneath the ground. And when you get there, they turn off all the lights. And you literally cannot see your hand in front of your face. That's the blackness that you feel, right? When you're in that spot. And then just to help people see there is hope, there is light in that. And maybe you are that person that is that hope, that is that light for them in that moment, like our friends out in Colorado. And so I think you just say, there is a way out, but you got to go through the hard process of change. You can't stay where you're at and stay in the blackness if you're not going to be willing to change.
That's true. You had to go through some hard times.
If somebody wants to see you preach, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I'd invite them to come 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings, 1125 West South Street, right here in Salina. It's the old Holiday Bowl. If you're familiar with Salina, it was a bowling alley way back in the day. We have a thing with bowling alleys.
Right, because there's another church getting ready to move in.
Another church redoing a bowling alley right now in our town. But yeah, that's 1125 West South Street, 10 a.m. Sunday mornings. You can look up on YouTube Crossroads Salina, Crossroads Church Salina, and that would find the YouTube feed where we have everything out there.
Nice.
So,
I'd say one theme as I'm sitting here, we've never met before the parking lot today, but it's a very consistent message as you're telling your story about identity. You started with you went to a small school, you were an athlete, and we have this discussion in my house on a daily basis because we're trying to negotiate youth athletics and trying to teach our kids to embrace who you are. But you could have been the athlete like that if I'm settled on that's my identity and everything I do from here is gonna that wasn't the case. And then it could have been I'm the accountant and that's my identity and so I'm the dirt bike beer drinking badass, that's my identity. And so you just keep having those stories, but every time you were willing to say this isn't good enough. And that's the conversation I think so many people need to have, is to say that don't settle for something that you can build. Don't settle for, hey, I'm going to be a great football player because I'm going to work harder than everybody else. But that's not who you were meant to be.
Right.
And so all the way up until you were talking about people that you invite into your church, that who they come in is not their identity. It's who God made them to be. And so that's what I'm going to take away from that. Is to hear that you were always willing to change and not settle, and how that's gotten you to this point. And by some definitions, it's not as high as it could have been financially or on the corporate level, but it's your identity.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
Yeah, it is important to when we come to Christ to identify with Him and not with the other things in the world around us. He has to take precedent over everything else. And when I finally surrender to that identity in Him, that's when, okay, now I can really use you in the ways that I want to use you.
Yeah, and once your identity became, I'm a son of God, it wasn't I'm a bookkeeper, I'm an operations manager, I'm a pastor. We call you Jesse, not Pastor Jesse, because that's not your identity is not now as this religious person even, or as having stature in the religious community. It is just kind of probably solid, hopefully, as a follower of Jesus, and it's not going to change up or down from there.
Yep, I try to
There's
make sure people in our congregation understand I'm no different than they are. I have struggles. I have things that I go through on a daily basis, just like they do, and we have to be willing to address those and identify, and say, I need to work on this.
Well, gentlemen, I know Jesse is working up against a hard time slot that he has something he has to do. Do we have any closing comments by anybody?
One thing that stood out to me, for myself and for people who tune into this, might be looking to hear from God. There's a couple moments where in your life you needed to take one path or the other, and we're waiting for that voice. And as someone who's heard a voice from God, that's not the only time that you kind of change directions, right? With the motorcycle, with your neighbors, and just so we can't wait on that. Yeah, it's a gift when we hear something audibly when there's a big moment, but I shouldn't wait for that. I should listen to that still small voice that the God gives us these choices, micro decisions, be taking those, and not wait for the big moment, that big clear voice. So,
like a child of the 70s, sometimes you got to get up and change a channel.
Sure, yeah.
You wouldn't know about
flip
that.
the knob.
Flip the knob.
When you leave the remote somewhere else.
When you leave the remote somewhere else. Something that I was reminded of is, great battles call for great warriors. Great battles make great warriors. And, there's things in your life that have been great battles. And, you've came out as a warrior of Christ on that. And I've admired you from afar for a long time. Our daughters did some things together.
Some volleyball
played
and stuff,
some volleyball and stuff together. And we never really interacted that much, but I've always admired you as a man.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for the invitation.
We are going to go through our closing right now. You're welcome to stay. It'll take about 3.5 minutes, or if you got to go.
No, I'm good.
Do you want to hear about the world's best beef jerky?
Do you want to hear about the world's best beef jerky?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have an informal sponsor that's not a sponsor, and that is Primal Jerky. It's made in the company was founded in a kitchen of some gentlemen by the name of Bo and Devin down in Hutchinson, Kansas. And not only is it the best jerky in the world, but if you start buying Primal and eating Primal, you'll be a top 25 world arm wrestler.
Yeah.
So that's how it works. They're still on my naughty list, and I did not reach out to them before this podcast. Bo had promised to let us try some of their new meat sticks that they're just bringing to the market. And he said he was going to send some. Bo, my address hasn't changed, and you didn't send them. So you're not getting he's not getting the full plug today.
Oh, yeah, cut it.
I'm going to hold that against him. What did you say earlier I should do? Did you say I should demean him?
Well, philosophize? Is that what
Philosophize and demean him? I'm not going to do that either, Thomas. I'm a godly man. But if you want to check out the world's best beef jerky, you can find it quite a few places. They're in over 300 stores throughout Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma. How do you say Missouri?
I try to keep it out of my mouth.
Jesse, how do you say Missouri?
I'd say Missouri.
Do you really?
Yeah, that's because he says it right.
You can get Primal Jerky at the Lone Star gas station right by Crossroads Church.
Do you drink with your pinky up?
No.
When you drink something, do you drink?
I don't think
Missouri.
so.
Missouri. Okay, but you can check them out on the internet at www.feedonprimal.com, or you can go to their Facebook page at Primal Jerky. Right now, they have some rejects for sale, some things that they felt weren't to their standards, and it's a little bit drier than they would like, or a little bit saltier than they would like, and they're selling them for $5 a bag that are normally $10. So
their
get on there.
Rejects are better than
Their rejects are better. I found some in my hunting pack that were like 2 years old. We ate them. They ate just fine. We also have another sponsor.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Who's our other? Who bought us lunch
Dun,
today?
dun, dun, dun. JourneyWorks.
I thought it was
If you
McAllister's. It's not
They didn't-
McAllister's.
McAllister's did not give it to us.
Is it Copenhagen?
They made
No.
it.
They made it.
Yeah.
We traded. We bartered.
Okay. So who is the sponsor then?
JourneyWorks. So if you need any painting, drywall, or whatever we call light construction in the Salina or Salina area, call us up. Joe, who's been on the podcast, is leading the charge, making spaces beautiful here. Journey-works.com. And they bought us lunch, so we give them a plug. It's also us, so it's kind of incestuous here.
We bought us lunch.
Can we cut that part where he says incestuous?
Nope.
I don't even know.
We were talking about Missouri, so it just worked.
I can't even spell it. But we also, the Humble Pursuit podcast, we have an internet presence as well. We have a Facebook page at the Humble Pursuit Podcast. We have a YouTube page. I still don't know what it is, but we post to it, and it works. If you found it, if you're watching us, hi. And then we have a Twitter, which, have you noticed? I'm tweeting.
I did see your tweet.
I'm tweeting.
I saw that.
I did see that it corresponded with when Donald Trump was released back onto the platform, that you're spending more time there.
We stay away from. Do you stay away from politics in church?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I stay
Good
away.
man.
I preach at a small church outside of Brookville, and I stay away from politics and religion because I find them both to be divisive.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't have a religion, right? We have a relationship.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's
amen,
right.
amen.
But you can find us on Twitter at Humble Pursuit, and remember, never settle, never give up. Live life with urgency to the fullest and in abundance. Face your legacy every day. The only day guaranteed is yesterday. For Thomas, a.k.a. Little Bill, Tyler, Jesse, and myself, God bless. We're out.